Hi Year 9, Mrs. Chappell here, and I wanted to talk to you about doing GCSE history. So I'm going to go through some of the kind of key areas that we study and look at the sort of skills in which it helps you develop, and also sort of outline what some of the assessment looks like and show you some examples of some work. So I hope you enjoy. So in history, there are, people say, why study it? Obviously, I'm incredibly biased and think it's an amazing subject and absolutely love it, love the stories, love everything behind it. But there's also some incredible skills that get learned alongside this as well. It's so important, I think, to be understanding about different cultures and differences, to understand the kind of impact that sort of past events have had in history. It really helps you make what we say judgments on events, on key people, that sort of thing. And all of these skills are what we call transferable skills. So it's not just sort of what we say pigeonholing yourself and you only be able to do things within history. These skills that you learn, you use in all of your other subjects, the ability to analyze information. You do this in English, you do this in geography, in business. These are all what we call transferable skills. And the other thing which I love is that you get to argue quite a lot. So I always say when you're kind of making a judgment, there's no right or wrong answer to a lot of this stuff. As long as you can support it with evidence, that's absolutely fine. So I always love a good argument where possible. We look at 4 different topics at GCSE. So we do something called Health and the People, which is looking at the history of medicine. So you start in kind of medieval time and go right through, look at the different changes and how they used to do surgeries and what they used to think made them ill. And you look at things like the Black Death and the impact that had. And you go right through the time periods, right through to modern day medicine and how the development of anaesthetic and things like keyhole surgery and plastic surgery and how it is that we're able to kind of do those amazing things today. You then also look at something called the American West, American expansion, which is looking at why America came to be as it is today. I'll talk about more of that in a minute. You also do the Cold War, which is looking at the building tension between America and Russia in the from the 40s right through to the 70s. We stop in 1972. And then we also look at Elizabethan England. So just to go into a bit more detail, Health and the People here. So Health and the People, like I say, goes from medieval time right through to modern day. Okay, so we look at, in 3 different areas, we look at disease and infection, we look at surgery and anatomy, so what they thought the body, how the body worked, that sort of thing, and then you also look at public health. Topical at the moment, obviously. So we look at measures that were put in place to help keep people healthy. So you start in the medieval period, you then kind of go, like I say, all the way through. So you look at somewhere called the Renaissance, which is where art became incredibly important. So, as art developed, people were able to do more realistic drawings of the body. Things like this really helped. And so you look at basically how they went from very basic surgeries in the Middle Ages, where it kind of be a case of sort of hold someone down on a table, saw off a leg, right through obviously to modern day medicine, where you have general and local anaesthetics, you have keyhole surgeries. People can go in, can't they, and have hip replacements and just leave the sort of tiniest of little scars. So we go right away from 1200 right through to 2020. The second one we then look at is American expansion. So this is starting in 1840, going right through to 1895. So this one actually personally is my absolute favourite. I absolutely love this one. And this is looking at America and how it came to be as it is today. So we look at the white settlers and why they were leaving Europe and coming across. And we look at why they were moving from the east coast right across to the west coast. So, you know, starting to take over things like California, Arizona, places like that. Now, obviously, it didn't come without its problems. So we look at the dangers that were associated with that journey west. We also look then at the conflict that developed in America between the Native Americans and the white Americans. So we sort of look at the Native American way of life and how that conflicted with the white Americans and how they really struggled to kind of understand each other, and how that then led to some wars. We also look at the American Civil War, and we look at the kind of people who were supporting the abolition of slavery. So we look at the impact that that then had on America when in 1865 all the slaves were liberated. And although it was amazing and fantastic, again it did cause some problems. So we look at that, and then we go kind of right through to sort of the late 1800s, 1895, looking at how eventually everyone came to sort of live together. So how was it that we had what we say consolidation of living in America? The third thing we look at is conflict and tension. It's called East meets West, and we do from 1945 through to 1972. This is looking at the origins of the Cold War, and then you kind of go into the development, and then what we say the transformation. So when relationships started to get a bit better. So we look at, you know, some of the main reasons as to why these two, what we say, ideologies really conflicted. So you look at the idea of capitalism versus communism. Then you look at the sort of Soviet expansion and why it was so many countries were falling into this Soviet expansion, and then why America were so fearful of this communist empire that was basically breeding. So lots of things involved with that. You know, it goes right through to looking at the building of the Berlin Wall. So you look at why that Berlin Wall was actually built in the first place. You know, what was the purpose behind it? What problems did it cause? It even kind of goes over into Asia, where we look at Vietnam War and the impact the Vietnam War had between America and Russia as well. Final thing we look at is Elizabethan England. So here we look at the reign of Elizabeth. So you go from 1958 through to 1603. Okay, and here we look at how it was she ruled England. You know, what was it that made her so amazing? Why is it that she's such a celebrated monarch? You know, the Gloriana, as we often talk about. So we look at some of the issues that she had, primarily with being female. It was very hard to be a female ruler in the 1500s. And then we look at what sort of changes she put in place and how she was able to really sort of transform England. And then obviously ending with that Spanish Armada at the end. So how was it that this tiny island was able to defeat the biggest empire in Europe at that time? So the course overall looks at so many different elements. You know, there's lots of periods of history. It's not just all modern. It's not all really old history. You know, there's a real mixture between the two. And just here on the screen, what we've also got is just some examples from some books. This is some Year 10 books. So this is looking at medicine. So you can see we've got a case study here on a man called John Hunter. And he was a very famous surgeon. So we look at, you know, what was it that made these people so great? What sort of areas did they pioneer in? You can also see on the other picture there, we look at elements of medieval medicine and what they first believed was making them ill. As you can see, you know, it is a lot of writing in history. I make no apologies for that. You know, it is an important skill that you have, and like I say, it supports your English incredibly well. You know, being able to write in these fluid paragraphs. And with that, that's not to say, you know, we've got lots of things in place basically to help you. So as you can see here on one of the pictures, we've got lots of what we call structure strips, which I know a lot of you will be used to. We use them throughout Year 8, Year 9. So you will have seen these in your books before. They're there to really help you in sort of frame your writing. So it gives you an idea of what sort of things we're looking for in each paragraph. So it's not one of those things where you completely struggle when you find it. We've got so many different things here to help you access the extended pieces of writing, and then by the end of the 2 years, it ultimately becomes second nature. The other thing we do lots of is, because I understand that it is a lot of content, it is a lot of information to learn, we've got lots of different methods to help you remember. So one example we've got here is something that we call dual coding, which is where we have little images on the side, and it's little things to kind of trigger your memory as to help in thinking how an event happened. So one example we've got here is how penicillin was mass produced. Penicillin, probably find a lot of you out there might have had penicillin at some point in your life. We look at the story behind it, and there are lots of different factors that led to penicillin being created and being mass produced. So that there is a little example of some of the ways in which we use to help you in remembering this content as well. The examination, so your exams will be in summer 2022. You take 2 papers, and they're each 2 hours long. So in one paper, you do your non-British, so you do your America and the Cold War, which is 1 hour for America, 1 hour for the Cold War. It's sat in a kind of 2-hour slot in an exam. And then you do another one, which is your 2 British papers, which is Britain, Health and the People, and Elizabethan England, and that again is 2 hours, and each paper is exactly the same weighting, 50% of your grade. Okay, so each unit ultimately is 25%. We've been very popular at GCSE, especially over the last few years. And there's lots of reasons why. There's so many students have said why they love taking it. They love finding out about new bits of information. Some of them love how they can relate it back to today's world. They find they really enjoy the discussions that you get to have. We do get to have some really great in-depth discussions about particular concepts, people, events, and it's something that people really seem to thrive on. There's just a few kind of quotations here on this slide that is from some of our students as to why they actually love taking the subject themselves. Feel free to pause it at any point and just sort of have a read, and likewise go back and have a read through any of the slides previously done. Careers-wise, there's lots of careers that you can go into with history. We've got law, journalism, politics, archaeology, accountancy. But the one thing I would say is it definitely doesn't limit you, okay? You could go into any career with history. It's skills, like I say, those transferable skills can be useful to anything. I had friends that did history at university and are now working in accountancy because they were picked out with having these particular sort of analytical skills, the ability to write for some of them. It really doesn't limit you. Don't think just because I do history I can only be a historian, or I can only go into sort of writing. Some of your top economists in the world did history as a degree as well. So there's lots of different things that it can lead into career-wise. So don't ever think by doing history you are going to limit yourself. You absolutely will not. The things we ask you to bring, please. Inquiring mind. You've got to be open to take on this information and be open to discussion and take different people's points of view. I say the ability to argue is always helpful. Some enthusiasm and self-motivation. GCSEs are hard. You're going to need to be self-motivated in order to be able to do some of the reading that's associated with it, or the homeworks that go with it. And in class, we haven't got time to always sort of dawdle about. You've got to be able to think, right, I've got to get on and get this done. Okay, so we really look for a bit of self-motivation as well. Now, if you have any questions, please feel free to get in contact. Obviously myself, Mrs. Chappell. I'm sure many Year 9 are aware that I'm going on maternity soon. So I leave end of November. So please get in touch beforehand. That'd be ideal. But we also have Mr. Evans as lead practitioner in history. And we also have your other Year 9 teachers, Mr. Ellis and Miss Murphy. So if you have any questions at all, please feel free to either speak to your teachers or email, and we'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions about that. Okay. Hopefully you found this useful. Like I say, please feel free to go back through the PowerPoint and read back through anything that's there. But if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to get in contact. Okay, thanks ever so much.